Hello and welcome to the Voice of Iron, and in this session, I'll be reading and ranting about the Highlander Assault Battlemech. First, I'll be going over the canon information that we have on the Highlander through SARNA, and then I'll be giving my personal thoughts and experiences with this mech. Description: the Highlander is one of the most well-known Star League Defense Force assault mechs, serving with distinction for almost 2 centuries since first entering service in 2592. Initially designed as a dedicated city and installation defender, the original model featured a variety of weaponry, along with 15.5 tons of ferrofibrous armor, but perhaps its most useful asset were the 3 Hildco jump jets, giving it a jumping range of 90 meters. Among the heaviest mech designs to feature jump jets at the time, their original task was to allow the Highlander the ability to jump over inconvenient obstacles such as buildings and outpace other mechs with a faster ground speed, but because of this increased mobility and its versatile weaponry, the Highlander proved to be a capable fighter on any battlefield, and within decades nearly every Battlemech regiment of the regular and royal armies featured them. However, it was during the design's initial trial runs that pilots began using these mechs in what would infamously become known as the Highlander Burial. Leaping into the air and landing directly on their enemy, a Highlander could literally drive a light mech into the ground. So successful was this maneuver that the design team re-engineered the legs to withstand repeated death from above attacks and turned what had been a desperation move into an art form, giving Highlander pilots an additional psychological edge. As with other Star League-era designs, the Highlander would suffer the loss of technology brought about by the Succession Wars, and when StarCorp's factory on Son Hoa was devastated towards the end of the Second Succession War, the original HGN-732 became virtually extinct. An agreement between StarCorp and Hollis Incorporated to rebuild destroyed chassis from scratch using readily available technology kept the line going until the mid-3030s, when limited production was restarted by StarCorp on Son Hoa and Kori, producing barely a dozen new mechs per year. These HGN-733 Highlanders were used in small numbers by the Capellan Confederation and Lyran Commonwealth, commonly as part of lances containing exterminators, victors, grasshoppers, and catapults. You know, big jumpers. Unbeknownst to many, Comstar also maintained a large stock of Highlanders left over from the Star League, some of which they gifted to the Draconis Combine during the War of 3039. The appearance of so many seemingly rare 733s, along with a few 732s whose advanced technology managed to slip through Comstar screening, had a large impact on Lyran morale during that conflict. Comstar would also use the design in their own military forces, the Com Guards, and even during the clan invasion, a few original 732s would take to the field as part of the clan's fighting forces. The Northwind Highlanders especially favored this namesake mech. In fact, during the Succession Wars, they were the only Inner Sphere army to keep a large number of them operational, along with Comstar. The Highlanders are especially skilled in delivering the famed Highlander Burial maneuver. By 3057, StarCorp's Son Hoa line was at full production, producing brand new original spec Highlanders for Lyran units of the Federated Commonwealth, just in time to take part in the FedCom Civil War. Highlanders would continue to be produced all the way through the Jihad, where advanced variants fought both for and against the Word of Blake. Weapons and equipment. The original HGN-732 Highlander carries a weapons mix that's more at home when fighting a ranged battle, but when the range is closed, the Highlander has the right equipment for the job. The primary weapon is an M7 Gauss rifle that's capable of stripping armor off of an enemy a ton at a time. The Gauss is backed up at long ranges by a Holly 20 LRM-20 launcher, and for close range work, it carries 2 Harman Star-class medium lasers and a Holly 6 SRM-6 launcher. 2 tons of ammo for the Gauss rifle, LRM and SRM launchers each provide good endurance, while the use of case grants added protection. Low heat buildup from the weapons allows for a nearly continuous barrage without taxing the 12 heatsinks, though pilots must still exhibit caution. Variants. The HGN-694. Introduced during the FedCom Civil War, this Highlander variant replaces the missiles, medium lasers, and jump jets with 2 large lasers and a heavy Gauss rifle. The M7 Gauss rifle remains in place. The HGN-641X2. This Comstar-developed variant is equipped with a pair of Artemis IV-guided MML-7 launchers with 4 tons of ammo. It keeps the Gauss rifle of the standard Highlander and mounts a pair of ER medium lasers. Case 2 systems protect the Gauss rifle and missile ammunition from explosions. A C3 slave unit allows the Highlander to share targeting data. Light ferrofibrous armor and a reinforced structure provide protection from weapons fire. To make room for all the equipment, this Highlander uses an XL engine and XL gyro. The HGN-732B. The 732B model is an upgrade of the classic 732 built exclusively for SLDF Royal units. This variant drops 2 heatsinks and a ton of SRM ammo. Artemis IV fire control system is added to the LRM and SRM launchers, while the heatsinks are upgraded to doubles. Additional short-range firepower comes in the form of a medium laser added to the right torso. The HGN-733. The 733 model is a downgrade of the Highlander, although it weathered the use of more primitive technology better than other SLDF designs. In place of the Gauss rifle, the mech now carries a Mydron Class B autocannon 10 with 2 tons of ammo and an additional ton of LRM reloads, while the rest of the Highlander's weapons have remained the same. The armor has also been upgraded by 2 tons, providing even more protection than the original 732 model. The speed profile of the Highlander maintains the original model's maximum speed of 54 km per hour, and the communication system is a Hartford COM A-7. The HGN-733C is identical to the 733, except that this model drops a ton of the SRM and LRM ammo each, and the autocannon 10 is upgraded to an autocannon 20. Fun fact, the 733C is what I primarily drove. The HGN-733P. This model swaps the autocannon 10 for a PPC, and 7 additional heatsinks. The HGN-733P. Introduced in 3025 as a melee-enhanced version of the standard HGN-733P, the HGN-733P moves the SRM-6 to the left torso, drops one of the right torso medium lasers, and downgrades the LRM rack to an LRM-15, allowing it to carry an assault katana in its left arm. The HGN-734 Highlander emphasizes its role as an urban combat mech, produced by the Lyran Alliance in the onset of the Civil War. The Gauss rifle has been replaced by a massive LB-20X AC. The medium lasers have been upgraded to ER medium lasers, and the SRM-6 was upgraded to a Streak version, with another Streak SRM-6 launcher added, as well as an ER large laser and a medium pulse laser. Upgrading the standard fusion engine to a new light engine and removing the LRM-20 launcher allowed these changes. The HGN-736. This Comstar version of the Highlander, introduced in the late 3050s, has been upgraded to carry the improved C3 computer, as well as upgrading the LRM-20 with an Artemis IV fire control system, and replacing the SRM-6 with a Streak SRM-4. This was accomplished by replacing the 12 single heatsinks of the 732 model with 10 double heatsinks, and by only using 1 ton of ammunition for the upgraded SRM launcher. The HGN-738. Another upgrade by the Lyran Alliance following the Civil War, the 738's largest weapon is its heavy Gauss rifle. The long-range missile launcher is replaced with an LRM-15, though it is guided by an Artemis IV fire control system, with an ER large laser providing additional long-range firepower. Should an enemy unit close in, the 738 can bring a pair of ER medium lasers and a Streak SRM-4 to bear. Though the mech uses a standard fusion engine, the concentration of ammunition in one torso and the Gauss in the other make it extremely vulnerable to critical damage, even with the inclusion of case for the ammunition bins. And finally, the HGN-740. This Dark Age variant of the Highlander uses an ER-PPC with a PPC capacitor for its main firepower. This is supplemented by an LRM-20 with an Artemis 4 fire control system to enhance accuracy. The left arm carries a Streak SRM-6, and the right torso has a pair of ER medium lasers. Light ferrofibrous armor provides protection. Case 2 protects the 2 tons of LRM and 1 ton of Streak SRM ammunition. The final weapon system is a pair of M-pods, one on each leg. Now, the Highlander has a handful of very useful design quirks. First and foremost, it is a command battlemech, which means that it can be very useful for commanders and for anyone who's taking the field to be able to coordinate better with other mechs. A cowl, which helps to protect that cockpit, and reinforced legs, as mentioned in the design scheme there, to allow it to perform that Highlander burial and death from above attacks easier. Although the specially designed and reinforced cockpit does mean that it has a difficult ejection. Now, the HGN-641X2 Highlander variant specifically also has the prototype quirk. And now, personal notes. I'd like to start my personal notes section about the Highlander with a story. There was a 4v4 assault match that I got to participate in with some buddies of mine. And at one point during that match, while everyone was concentrating on their own targets and everyone was trying to take down the units that were near them, cresting a hill and basically making my buddy unable to fight anymore to the point where he had to quit the match or risk losing the mech, was a full-on arena-modded Atlas. And I mean, this thing was an Atlas with a mech-scale assault battle axe, alright? And it was almost clean. He'd been peppered, and I'd been peppered, but both of us were pretty much at the same level of armor degradation, and it was just us. We entered the circle, and we had a real blow-for-blow fight back and forth. I mean, an Arena Atlas is nothing to sneeze at. And then at the end of that fight, as my Highlander 733C continued pivoting around this guy to try my best to win this duel and not die, I actually won. I legged him, even though I lost half of my mech. But I did succeed. I think that's a great way to start talking about the Highlander because, again, when you think of Battlemechs and you think of like assault mechs, most people tend to think of the Atlas as kind of the peak, at least until the Direwolf shows up. But the fact that this Highlander was able to pretty much 1v1 an Atlas and come out on top, albeit with a little bit of luck, and a little bit of the glory of the dice roll, you know. The fact that he was able to come out on top and it wasn't just an immediate foregone conclusion does tell you a little bit about this machine. In terms of other stories of examples, I fought along a buddy of mine, both of us in Highlanders, during the war against the Ronin in the new Free Rosselhague Republic. I was piloting a 733C, which it's basically a standard Highlander, but instead of the Gauss rifle, you have an AC-20. And my buddy was piloting the 733 Double P with an Assault Claymore. By the way, if you've never seen an Assault Claymore being held by a Highlander, I'm serious. I feel like these things were designed to hold it. You'd think that they would be designed to carry, like, you know, that great sword that specifically looks like a sword, but nah. The Assault Claymore, it looks like a gigantic slab of metal. It's like a giant propeller blade, but turned into a sword and the scale of a mech. In our mech bay, on the Leopard dropship, alright, the sword is so large that even in a resting position, it is resting up against the main catwalk that stretches the entire length of the mech bay. That's how big this thing's sword is. Anyway, so he went in for melee focus, and I went in for more general focus, but both of us were driving Highlanders. And it is very impressive how devastating two Highlanders can be back-to-back. We were with a full lance, but he and I kind of ended up having to split off to fight off a horde of the Ronin who came in. Now, I remember one fight in particular where he and I were kind of back-to-back, almost literally, as we were fighting incoming Ronin forces. And I have to say that the Highlander, it feels satisfying to pilot. It punches similar to an Atlas, but the jumping ability really adds to how freely you can move around the battlefield. I remember we were having to jump in and out of some ruins in order to try and, stave off fire, while at the same time being able to keep up the fight. Anything that got close, I could punch, my buddy could swing that claymore, and anything that was far enough away, well, we both had lerms to try and take care of it, and it just... there was always something that we could bring to bear at any level of it. I mean, all Highlanders are monstrous in melee, whether they have a dedicated melee weapon or not. But that said, that fight did teach us that, well, all Highlanders are still slow. I mentioned jumping back and forth in between cover, but jumping can only take you so far. Anyone who's actually fought the Cretans en masse before knows that they really prefer lighter assets en masse to, say, something like a gun line for the Davians or just assault drop like the Lyrans. And eventually you can get swarmed in these things. Whether or not I was jumping between cover, they could outmaneuver us pretty easily. So, unfortunately, one of our Highlanders was pretty much scrapped in that fight, and while we did eke out the win, it was more because our reinforcements were able to assist us in time than anything else. Now, don't get me wrong, we obliterated more mechs and more pilots in that fight with just the two of us than they could have possibly hoped to recover, but they were desperate enough to just keep throwing stuff at us until we went down, and go down one of us did, and eke out the win the other did. It's, no mech is perfect, and the weakness on this one is, of course, its speed, and the fact that, hey, if you get outmaneuvered, if you have people concentrate their fire on you, you will go down. That's pretty much a given for most assault mechs. But that's really the only major negative this thing has. It's pretty well-rounded in terms of armaments. Again, the original was very much focused on kind of a long-range philosophy. I found it interesting that they said that the original design was made for urban protection, because I did take the 733 out while on garrison duty in the Boris system, I believe. There were 2 lances of mechs, supported by a contingent of crater cobras, if you can believe it. And the rest of my lance was just mediums and a light. By the way, our lance commander was driving the light. He found a raven that he really liked, and he went for it. Long story short, in my Highlander alone, again, not the dedicated melee Highlander, just the 733C, I punched 3 of these medium mechs to death and blew away the rest with my armaments, and I lost 0 components. They did not get through my armor in this thing. I mean, if you tell me this thing is a defense mech, yes, it is. You don't need high speed when you're defending a settlement and when you have a lot of cover and walls to go around, unless you're being swarmed, as I mentioned before. It is an incredibly performing machine. And I just think that those stories and just my time in the cockpit during the Ronin War, it taught me the good and the bad of this thing. There is something incredibly satisfying about driving something that is this massive that can jump. I might have mentioned that a little bit when talking about the Marauder 2, because it's a 100-tonner that can jump, but something about this, with the versatility that it brings to the table, it just feels really, really good. It is a heavy metal machine. Funny enough, I believe Rhonda Snord of Snord's Irregulars actually has a Highlander called Heavy Metal. Fun fact, she blasts ancient Terran music known as heavy metal, hence the name of the mech. And it's just great to see that some of the classic music is being brought back in the 31st century. But the Highlander is a monster on the battlefield. At some point, I think I want to go over some of the spookier stories in the Battletech universe, but there is a tale of a green Highlander that just shows up sometimes and heroically defends traditionally Star League-held territory. I believe there was one particular account where a medium mech pilot ended up coming face-to-face with, I want to say it was Timberwolf, or it was something terrifying. It was during the clan invasion. And he froze up, and out of nowhere, a green Highlander, again, like the same green as the SLDF colors, showed up and absolutely pummeled the clan mech to death. And then just vanished. It just vanished without a trace. And all of his commanders, when he came back, congratulated this medium mech pilot for single-handedly defeating that clan warrior, but he kept saying, dude, it was a Highlander. And no matter how much he said this, his command didn't believe him because radar showed nothing. Scans showed nothing. There was no evidence of a Highlander ever being there. Well, except for the fact that none of the medium mech's weapons seemed to have been fired. Anyway, this thing is a legendary machine, whether it be for the actual Northwind Highlanders mercenary group themselves, who, of course, keep up that Scottish tradition in their own right, or whether it be just its status as a great SLDF and Star League-era mech, or whether it be one of the titans that managed to last through the Succession Wars, albeit not in the greatest number of, numbers. I go back again to that story of 1v1ing an Arena Atlas, and the other story of fighting off Ronin back-to-back with another Highlander pilot, and all of those moments are memorable. There's something about the Highlander that just feels, I don't want to say heroic, it feels epic in scale. It feels incredible to pilot one of these things. I'm not normally the biggest fan of the idea of just an all-rounder hero mech. I do like me a Centurion, but to the same degree, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of something like the Wolverine when I could take a more specialized design. That much to say, the Highlander kind of changed my mind a little bit on that. This thing feels like it can do a little bit of everything, and more than that, it feels satisfying to do. It's very much the sort of mech that you would expect a heroic last stand to be given in, or leading a glorious charge forward, albeit a little slowly, because you're moving below tactical speed. The point is, if a Highlander shows up on the field, you're in trouble. I would almost say prioritize taking down the Highlander over taking down an Atlas if both are on the field, just because of the versatility of that thing. Depends on the strategy, of course, but that's the scale I attribute to this thing. And after driving it for a while, I can definitely say I will happily get in the cockpit of this thing again the next time I get a chance, because it just feels so satisfying to drive. Anyway, that concludes today's Reading and Rant, and thank you for listening to my voice.